Yeah, he's growing.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Y'all hear me okay? Okay, great. So let's just call this meeting to order. Karen, do you have attendance? Okay. All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right. Aye.
Anyone opposed? How about the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Karen, I believe we do have some citizen comments.
We have two right at the moment. The first one is Matt Finch.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Finch. I'm from Hello everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're on and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. That's just something we do before public comment in Australia, where I've come here from. I've been the guest of Ann Arbor District Libraries, working on behalf of the University of Southern Queensland. Ann Arbor District Libraries is internationally recognised as being a ridiculously awesome public library service. I hope everyone in this room already knows that fact. For me, as someone in Australia who was invited to work with your staff for a week, it was spectacular to come and see something that, you read about things online, you've seen it through a screen on a laptop, to come and be able to see how people actually work together, to be involved in the running of the public library for a week and see that it lives up to the hype in every regard was an incredibly heartening experience for me. During the time I've been here, it's been my privilege to work with the various teams on exploring even more creative and playful and open-ended ways for the community to explore knowledge and culture on their own terms, to move from a sense of programming ever being instructional and making it more like the idea that the library is a magic space where you explore the things that you want to explore, understand the things you want to understand, and create new and amazing stories and ideas. It goes right back to the original idea of the library being you took the book you wanted to, you read it the way you wanted to. We're not teachers, we're not preachers, we're your space of imagination and learning and connection. This was only possible to open these new avenues of play because the calibre of the staff and the quality of the service is so incredibly high. I could list names, and not even just expected ones within programming or the leadership team. People like Darla in the archives, Hyman and Mark in the security team, everyone stood out for me. And as I say, not just the people who care for collections and community activities, but also the facilities and the security team who are incredibly competent, warm and welcoming in every regard. The finance team, who both participated in some of the wildest and most playful activities and who followed up with me, asking questions about historical memory and archives and grieving, like they had a super passionate connection to the business and mission of this organisation. And finally, I wanted to point out, you already know this, but you have an incredible leadership team. The two things that make this clear is that Eli, as Deputy Director, was responsible for inviting me here. Eli has an international profile as a speaker who travels the world, and we all recognise his name and his contribution. Sometimes, especially when guys do this, it's a bit like they're a walking commercial for themselves, like, that dude is awesome, oh, he happens to work at this institution. Eli always makes it clear he's part of a broader team and a community of incredible individuals, and you never think of his singular accomplishments without also being aware that he's part of an amazing institution. And I also, having never met Josie but knowing her only by reputation, I saw her guide the conversation around active shooter training on Monday at the Staff Development Day, which is incredibly difficult, especially, say, for children's librarians who have to think about their responsibilities in such an issue. And it was done with such compassion, such a sense of authority, but also such a recognition of the realities of the situations we find ourselves in, that as knowledge institutions we may face the most drastic circumstances. And these things are not just about kind, beautiful words, but also about the most serious and urgent of community needs. I'm sure you'll hear more about the work we did together this week, but essentially your staff are amazing, they're ready to soar to even newer heights, and I was so privileged to be even a small part of that process. So thank you to the leadership team, but every single person I've worked with today, I commend them all to you wholeheartedly. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you. I'm very grateful that you've come to speak to us after the point at which we were recording this. Because there's a lot of gems I think that we can harvest from that. Thank you so much.
And Danny Worspa. Apologize in advance.
Hi, my name is Chandani. I'm currently a senior at the U of M. I'm studying public policy, and I'm here as an intern for Civ City. If you don't know Civ City, it's a local nonpartisan nonprofit started by Mary Morgan. She couldn't be here today, but she is the executive director and founder, and it focuses on increasing awareness of how local government works and getting residents engaged in civic life using Ann Arbor as kind of a starting point. And so through Civ City, I have a big project that I'm working on. It's a research paper looking at the level of diversity in local government and local elected officials. So I want to come to tell you all that I will be sending you a survey. You as well as members of the Ann Arbor City Council, the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners, and the Ann Arbor Board of Education. So this survey will be asking for your age range, your socioeconomic status, gender, race, and your education status. And it will also ask you how you feel about that diversity or lack of diversity in each identity within your specific board. And if you're uncomfortable filling out this survey online, I'm hoping to get 100%. So I can meet with you in person, or we can talk about it over the phone. And the end product will be a written report, hopefully by the end of December of this year. And I'll be comparing both local levels and national levels of diversity in elected bodies. What I, as well as Mary, hope is that this report is going to encourage public discussion of the importance of diversity in representative government and more awareness of the current state of diversity or lack of diversity in Ann Arbor government. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we might have some ideas of other boards for you to talk to too.
Are you talking to the WCC board?
Like county commissioner?
No, the community college is also an elected board in the county.
What we were planning on doing is focusing on Ann Arbor, and then also the Washington County Board of Commissioners. We might be looking at IPSI too,
Okay.
but
Okay.
we didn't want it to be too broad.
Okay.
Great. Okay, that's it for now.
That's
Well, if something piques your interest during the meeting, you can speak at the end as well. Okay, so now we move on to financial reports. Bill Cooper.
Good evening. You have my report in front of you. I'm just going to highlight a couple of topics there. For the fund balance, or for the tax receipts, we have collected 89.5% of our projected receipts as of September 30th. So that's $13,965,793 out of the $15,598,058 that we expect to collect by the end of the year. And also, we are currently under budget year to date of $627,244. Are there any questions?
Sounds like we have money to spend.
As of right now, just because our
That sounds
revenues
good.
are higher
I'm kidding.
than our expenditures now, but as the tax collections slow down, the expenses will catch up.
No parties coming.
No,
Lynn, do you expect us to continue to have a positive balance at the end of the fiscal year?
I would hope we still have a positive balance.
You sound
Yeah,
a little
we-
unsure about whether.
Well, I mean, I don't, I don't want to, we're not going to be negative, that's for sure. But I'm hoping that we're not going to be as high as we were last year. We should be closer to spending all of our budgeted.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now we move on to the Budget and Finance Committee.
The Budget and Finance Committee met to review the library's investments that are held by Bank of Ann Arbor, one of the banks that holds investments for the library. we uncovered during the course of this meeting that our investment policy, the organizational policy for the Ann Arbor District Library is quite conservative. And in fact, with some of our current investments, we are actually violating our own policy, although we are in full legal compliance with our investments. And so what we're going to do later tonight is we're going to talk with Kathy Savoy from Bank of Ann Arbor about how we might align our policy with our current investments and or keep the same policy and change our investments. The Budget and Finance Committee, this is a little bit of a confusing issue. So our policy as an organization is much more conservative than what the law allows for in terms of how our investments are made. And we have a recommendation for the board in terms of moving ahead. And as we drill down on it, essentially the current policy only allows us to have investments that last over the course of a year. And I believe we have investments with Bank of Ann Arbor right now that are 5-year investments.
They've been pulling them back,
but they've been pulling them back, yes. So we're going to bring this into discussion later as new business and potentially propose a policy change, and Kathy can get into the finer points.
So you say our policy now says we only invest a year at a time?
That's right. Yeah, and as we discuss this, Josie, you can help out too. Going back and looking at the history of the policy, we think that particular policy was last edited in the late 90s.
It was edited in 1998.
98.
And it's a reflection of that time and the fact that we had the financial scandal. And so the policy is very conservative consequently.
I see.
Because it was about a period of recovery.
Because we've certainly been investigating the policy and revising policy since then.
But that one, it's because the way these funds were invested were not a violation of any laws.
Oh.
It was not something that triggered a question of the
legal
auditor
review.
or a legal review. It's just a practice, the library's own practice. So we are going to try to make
a
this
new practice.
work better for the library and
Okay.
still.
This is one of those instances where the bandwidth of what we can do legally is wider than
What we've been doing. Yeah.
And that's really a question for the board, just to decide what level of risk that we want to take on at this time in terms of our investments, which overall are not risky
Right.
No.
at all.
No, we have no risky
Yes,
investments.
the law provides for that. I think that's all.
Okay, any questions? Okay, great. So I think that we move on now to the executive committee. So we have been meeting about twice a month. So Lynn and I met with Josie about 2 weeks ago, and then the 3 of us met with Josie this evening. But I have just essentially 2 points of business to share with you. One is related to what we'll hear later tonight from Epic MRA. So tonight we're going to be looking back, but what we talked about in our executive committee meeting was looking forward. So we need to both think about, what feedback have we received before as we sort of talk about what questions do we want to ask about now. So the executive committee will next be talking about developing the question set that we'll ask next year. So that's something that we've been kind of getting ready for. But I know that we talked again tonight. We want the executive committee to be as much about efficiency and more about transparency. Like we want to make sure that we're always bringing everything back to the full board and that we're not advancing too much business in that small group, because we moved to this committee as a whole to kind of get away from just doing things in tiny committees, and Jim was kind of reflecting on this tonight. So we'll be developing these, like a starting point for the questions, and then we'll bring them back to the board before they all go out. So we want to make sure that we got the sense that we were not going to advance very quickly with our goals if we tried to do everything all together, but we want to make sure that we do as much together as we possibly can.
Will there be any communication in smaller groups between board meetings? Or will it just be the executive committee meeting and then informing
The board,
as a whole?
at the moment, that there's that structure plus the finance committee, and those are the only formal in between these meetings, communications.
And
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jamie. I'd also say, Jan, just to kind of clarify, I think that when we did this last time, as Josie reminded me, we had 2 sessions in the communications committee to get the work done. And what we're proposing is a starting session with the executive committee and a second working session with the board. Not a session simply to
like rubber stamp.
inform and rubber stamp, but to actually complete the work as a group, as opposed to the work already being done.
Which is what the concept was all along.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
And I'm fine with that. The only thing I'd ask is, it'd be great to see the draft in advance.
Great.
That's true.
Yeah, we can
That would
absolutely
be
make sure
helpful.
that happens.
Some of us think slower than others.
Absolutely.
I think we had 150 pages to review to get ready for today's meeting, so I don't worry about the library giving me plenty of
Okay.
advanced material
Homework.
for today. Also, we did have a conversation at the last meeting where we started to talk about and think about this, and it seems like it's been long coming. This is my first time involved in this process, but we've been talking about it for a while. It seems like it should be, and we know kind of how we want to focus, and like you nodded to forward thinking.
Great. And the other piece is just the director's evaluation process. As you know, we've been working with Sarah Winston on this process, and so we met with her tonight to receive the benchmarking sort of results. So by benchmarking, I mean that she talked with people at other libraries around the country to sort of learn about how they do this process. And probably the biggest takeaway that I shared with Josie is that, surprise, surprise, there's no like magic way to evaluate a director. No one had like a, well, this is just...
what we've been telling you.
But I do think that they learned a lot from those conversations, and they said that they were very pleased to have always been, Josie was able to give them introductions to the people they talked to at each of the locations, and each of them was like, oh, anything for Josie. So I think the conversations went really well, and they learned a lot, and they've also learned a lot from us. They've talked to a number of us, and they've talked a lot with Josie. So I think we're in a good place to, they've given us the feedback. They're going to give it to Josie later this week, and then they're going to start kind of wrapping up and giving us what we need to run a director's evaluation every year without having to think about it so much in the process details. Any questions about that? Okay. Great, so that's what I have to share for that committee. Let's move on. Come to the director's report.
There are slides. So the first item in the director's report was about the suspension of MailCat. So just because you know this occurred on October 2nd, we had put out the information about it a month prior. Today, it's an irony. Today was the first day I've had two people ask me what happened to MailCat. So since it's suspended, so as people begin to need it or think about it, they'll find it's not there and they weren't necessarily aware. So we're giving them the explanation. What's interesting for you to be aware is we're telling people we still have what we call traditional ILL. The volume has increased from 5 to 7 requests a day to around 30.
Wow.
Requests a day. So people are using ILL in place of MailCat. It's a slower process, but it's an effective one. This is not a burden. 30 a day is not a burden because the MailCat work, the incoming that was already out on request, that's slowing down. So the people who do this work all work in that same area. So the feedback to us is this is totally doable. Okay. So we're still good about that. We hope it will resume in 2018. That's about how well our migration goes, and also it's on the other side, on the side of the MCLS, working with us to bring it back up on their side of things. So, and they're very on top of it. It just is one of those things. You just saw Dr. Matt Finch. Heard him talk about being here and what a pleasure it was, and what a great compliment to all of you, staff and the community. Nicely done. That's how he is, obviously, and he did that all week long everywhere. He was our guest, and he spoke at our staff day. He led our staff day, a lot of the work we did on staff day, on our development day. He's made a presentation here for arts nonprofits that was public. We had a number of people from the community, from the nonprofit art community who came here to hear him speak. He also did an academic presentation at Shapiro, which was open to all the people who worked in all the libraries on campus, and so that was also done. Then he went with us to the University of Michigan School of Information, where we were recruiting grad students to work here in our Public Library Associate program. He went with us to help us do that. So we had our secret weapon, as it was, and I think it was effective. We'll find out how effective. Then he did an open presentation for library staff all around our community. Outside of Ann Arbor District Library, we opened it up to all our libraries in any nearby county from anyone who wanted to come. So, so a few did, but perhaps the word will get out about Matt now, and when he comes back in the winter, which he's talking about coming back, maybe we'll get some more people to come to the library for a library staff day. So we're very happy. Our October 15th Wondrous Change event, which was the culmination of his week yesterday, brought about 250 people to the downtown library, and there's a film, which I think we're going to show as a result of that day. It's a very short film.
Wondrous Strange is an opportunity for the Ann Arbor community to step inside the world of stories. It uses time travel to explore the past, present, and future of this very city. People can use art or science, craft, and creativity to express themselves and tell us about where they think the world is going, things they think have happened in the past, urban myths, strange encounters with monsters and ghosts, anything unusual or uncanny. You can not only learn about it, but actually be part of that storytelling experience. We've got people telling the future of Ann Arbor, going as far ahead as 5,000 years in the future. I've seen a world where groundhogs rule the earth. I've seen a world where humanity has outlawed clothing except for hats. Young and old have written us postcards from the future telling us where they think things might be going. But you can also build a castle in the sky, look at a historic news story, or just build a robot and send it on a play-based adventure. Whatever you want to do, you come here and you steer where the story goes.
So I encourage you, if you didn't enter the downtown library through the front doors, to go upstairs to the lobby and look up, and you'll see that castle. It's hanging from the ceiling out there. A few pieces have dropped off, and they've been moved away, but for the most part, it's holding together. And I also find these things are always so interesting to me. Where else do you see 8, 9, 10-year-olds amalgamating an anomaly than at an AADL program? And that was one of the titles of one of those tables. And so there was a bunch of little boys standing around that table amalgamating an anomaly. And so that's part of what we do. We will bring you up to date. We brought you up to date at the last board meeting on the website and where we are right now. Everything's still going along as planned for a migration and a launch in January. That's all still ongoing. We did bring the new staff interface to the website for people to look at on staff day and spend a lot of time with it. And we'll ask people to beat it up over a process of time. And we'll even do a beta where some of the members of the public who we know use our catalog a lot, we will ask them to go in and use this new catalog a lot and see what the bugs are and where the glitches are before we launch. So we have all that in hand. We had a record attendance at the staff day. The library has closed one day a year for us in staff in-service day all the years I've worked here before I was library director. And this was record attendance of 135 folks. We had many people who work for us, we call casually, the world calls part-time, asked to be able to be at staff day. So we had to figure this out because they're paid, it's time, paid, but we need them to cover a lot of desks for us throughout the rest of the week. So we had to make sure we could make that happen. But we tried not to turn anyone down. And consequently, we had the biggest staff day we've had in all my time here. It was really, really great. And we did. Matt talked about it, so I'll mention it. Detective Spickard from the Ann Arbor Police Department came to the library, I'm trying to think, was it 2013? And it was the same year as the Newtown active shooting. And he came to us that year and did active shooter training for us. And then we followed it with a situation where we had this building, we were closed, and the staff could move all around in this building and find out where the dead ends are, because there are some, and we don't want anyone to go into one if they're trying to get themselves or someone out. And so we did that. And so Mr. Detective Spickard came back. It's been a number of years. We had actually had him scheduled to come before the library shooting in New Mexico, and certainly before the shooting in Las Vegas. It made this conversation a week ago more poignant and certainly more difficult, but it's something we needed to do, and so we did it, and we appreciated him and his sensitivity to us. He answered the hard questions, and he did that very, very well. And then Matt Finch. So between the two, we had a very packed day, and we had the kind of day that lets you think about the tough stuff, but then allows you the freedom to relax and think about the fun stuff, and it be okay. And so that's the sort of day we had, and I think I know from the feedback that it was appreciated on all fronts. So for the people who were in charge of that, we have a staff day committee, and they did a fabulous job. So we're very, very happy about that. We are asked, feels like all the time, by courses, whether they're graduate or undergraduate courses at the various universities around us, to be allowed to have project work done here. And so we heard today about someone who's an intern who's going to be doing a survey, which is was one kind. So two that we're actively involved in right now, the UMSI Contextual Inquiry and Consulting class is studying the Contact Us database that we have had for over a decade, how we collected that, how we've responded, what's in it. How can you mine that information and see the issues and the comments and the resolutions over a decade of time, and then how to do that better, how for that to not be the time taker that it is, but still be responsive the way it is. So they're working on that. Then Apex Consulting, U of M Ross School of Business has undergrad consulting clubs and graduate consulting clubs is what they're called. And they name themselves, they organize themselves. And this particular group is interested in looking at our request fulfillment data. So we have years of this. How long do things stay on the whole shelf? How many items are not picked up? What is the time frame of those items that are picked up? How many times what's the request on an item? That's sort of that number thing. It's to help us better understand how we need to collect, and also what does the whole shelf, what does it represent to people, and how can we provide that better, in a better way. For instance, one thing we do know, and we're doing it, when we launch the new website and migrate over, we're going to have a 7-day hold period rather than 6-day. Because we know people come to the library on the same day of the week habitually. And if that is not in that, that means that for many of them, they miss their hold because it's the 7th day of whatever that period is. And so they end up coming twice, or they miss their hold. So we're going to try to work on that. So that's what that's about. And we'll have a report from them at the end of the semester. So we're working with them. And then, Strategic Plan Goal 3.3, Will Gordon, the CEO of O'Neill Construction, is here this evening to talk to you about the progress that they are making at this point in time doing the assessment on the downtown building. It is not a completed project. We do not have figures, numbers, dollar numbers, but we do have some notion of what our options might be and then what's involved in getting to a number for those options. So Will's here and he'll follow a little bit later. Also, John Kavanaugh is here from Epic MRA at our invitation to talk to us about the 2016 Epic MRA survey in the context of how it's developed and how to develop the same type of survey going forward. So that's something that he'll be discussing. And then this is a summary of public and staff comments about the Star Wars Fest. I mean, they're hard. I'm not going to try to read because it's sideways and it's little print. But just to give you an idea of what gets talked about, there's the Star Wars Fest. Wonder Strange, which is what occurred this past Sunday. Pulp's birthday. So it seems odd that we have Pulp's birthday. Happy birthday, Pulp, but we do. And then this is the time traveling robots. This is putting together, I think, this is the castle that's upstairs, right? That's hanging up up on the ceiling. I thought I recognized the paper. And then, here is a photograph of what this room looked like when the staff were having to put out all of the t-shirts in sizes and colors in order to fulfill the orders of people who participated in the summer game and got their t-shirt. So that's how many, and that's how much goes into that right here in this room. This is someone on staff who has decided to be someone else for a moment. And this is Westgate. This is about the art that's there, and there are three, those of you who haven't been out there, there are three giant pieces by Ben, I'm doing it.
That's his comment.
Oh, it's his comment. Wait.
He makes a comment there.
Oh, Ben Cohen.
Ben, oh yes, yeah, so it's right. Ben Cohen, I'm sorry, I can see it now. And he grew up on the west side.
Oh, cool.
And Westgate was his branch. And so when he came back to town and saw what was happening, he had these in his parents' basement. He now lives in New York. And he came and he talked to me. He actually knows my daughter-in-law. And so he said, Mrs. Parker, if I give them to you, would you put them in that library? And I said, sure. Oh. And so, because they fit, they just do it. And so we're very happy to have them there. Wampatos at the Star Wars Fest. And then this one is A2 STEAM second graders came here on a field trip, and this is Nicole doing a story time in the story room upstairs. And this is they came here and they had a very good time, wonderful time. So much fun that the kindergarten teacher whose class I read in every Tuesday at STEAM has asked if the whole kindergarten from STEAM can come to the downtown library, and we're working out that right now, how that can happen. This is another STEAM fun thing. Bill Van Loo is a teacher at STEAM. They brought 8 people here as a staff in service to one of our public letterpress programs from STEAM. And then the sign he made is follow him on Twitter. He did that with letterpress, and that's hanging in the door of his classroom out at Northside at STEAM. Somebody was talking about they borrowed a mobile Cintiq from us, and their current library, which doesn't say where that is, has a free herb garden. And Life Hacker is an online blog, and they just did a piece on unusual things at libraries and featured AADL. So wanted you to know about that. We've upgraded our spinning wheel from Ashford Joy to Ashford Joy from Ashford Kiwi 2. So, and this person is very happy about that. And even though I don't have a clue what that means, I'm glad she's happy about that. So, this is something Rich Reddy, who is our new manager of communications and marketing, and he's right back here with Eli. Rich is right there. Has started working, jumped right in, and this is just one example. He has us verified on Facebook, which is it takes a time, it's a process, and he spent the last 2 weeks doing it, and we appreciate that piece of what he's done, and in addition to a number of others in the last couple of weeks. So thanks, Rich. So, get that. So that's my director's report. If there are any other questions.
I have a question, Josie.
Okay.
So, online in some forums, there's a kerfuffle over computers being in the children's section at the Westgate branch. And I was wondering if you could speak to the need for computers or the rationale behind having computers in children's sections across the district.
We have these are concerns that have risen since Westgate opened. The computers at Westgate are iPads. And the computers in the other locations in the system are not. They will be. I will say it out loud right now. They will be. But we started with that at Westgate. iPads are for the most part, for the young child, are more familiar. They already know about a finger on a screen. They don't really know about a mouse at all. So it makes sense that they're attracted to it in a way they might not be to a screen that if you press a button, nothing happens, but you have to do it with the mouse. So the iPads make them attractive. They also give us more flexibility in terms of what's provided on that. So that creates interest in those machines. The location of them is in the middle of the space, which is true of every other place in our system, except downtown. The computers are on one end of the room. In Traverwood, they're in front of the picture books, but in a kind of off to the end. But that's about building size, building design. That's not about us deciding that we're going to put computers in the most prominent, most interesting space in the library. At Westgate, it's actually interesting why they're there. They're there next to a big steel girder. And that's where the power and all of the technology could come down from the ceiling logically. And so, and otherwise you have to bust up all the concrete to run it. So we put it there because that's where you could put the rolling table to plug it in. And that's why they're there. The controversy around this is the parents who are finding their children when they go there, their children want to look at the computers more than the parent wants them to look at the computers. Their suggested solution is that we move them out. That's the dilemma. And for us, it's one where we must consider all our patrons and all children who would come to the public library. Not every child has access to a computer other than at the public library. So it's incredibly important that computing is available in public areas for children in public libraries. For them to do well in school, for them to be able to compete, they need to know how to use computing. And so that's what we provide, that form of literacy, in much the same way we would provide literacy with the print book. We respect parents' concerns about how space is designed for safety and for comfort and for reasonable use, but to determine that we don't have something as ubiquitous in our world as computing, it's not something that we're able to offer up. Does that answer that issue?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Enough?
Okay, thank you.
Any questions or
Is there
follow-up?
still a thought among some educators of young people that it's better for them to not have computers until a certain age?
And I understand that. And what I've said to parents who've read that and whose families choose to operate that way is that when you come to the public library, you tell your children no. Mm-hmm. And they do other things at the public library. There's so much else to do that this one thing is not the only thing to do. And these are littles, so they're throwing themselves down and having a hissy fit.
Yeah.
And
but
so
there's
this
also
is
the possibility that the child looks at an open window and wants to change the snow
right.
outside the sun.
No, I hear you, Jan.
No, I'm not saying, I just know I hear this
yes,
among educators.
Yeah. And it's true. There are pediatricians who are concerned about brain development and eye, brain, and motor skills.
Motor skills,
yes,
especially.
Yes, and I know that. But it's still something the library can't decide that for an individual parent. Parents do, and people do. There are parents who do not allow their children access to library computers, and so they don't. We don't decide for them, and we don't make them do that. The same way we can't help the parent who needs to say no, and who's having trouble doing that. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything further?
Oh, that's great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, and congratulations on quite a month. My goodness. Okay, so let's see. We move on now to, I believe Eli is going to come talk to us. The agenda item is identify opportunities to increase cross-channel interaction update.
In other words, an update on email marketing. So what we're going to talk about today is the email newsletter This Week at AADL. So we started this on August 7th. Since that, we've sent 425,000 emails across 10 issues, so about 42,000 emails per issue. Out of that, 129,000 emails were opened, 30%, which is a very good open rate. We're delighted by that. And we netted about 13,000 clicks across all 425,000 of those. So about 3.2% of all of the emails had a click in them somewhere, averaging it out across all of them. We currently have 42,997 subscribers to the email list. Each week, about 0.3 to 0.6% unsubscribe. I'll show you a chart of that in a minute, which we're very pleased by. That's going very well. The way that you get on this list is that any new users created on aadl.org are now automatically added to the list. For a while, we weren't doing that, so we could see how fast people were unsubscribing, but now every week we automatically add the new users to the list. So where people are clicking on currently, events and blog posts are the most clicks with 8,581 clicks. New and popular items, we alternate each week between highlighting new items and highlighting popular items. So that's about 3,400 clicks. And then other things, including the summer game, contact us, and social links, about 1,700 clicks on those as well. Here are our top 10 items that were clicked the most. Surprising nobody who works in libraries, the solar eclipse viewing party was number one at 441 clicks. That was about as many phone calls as we got that morning as well. The summer game shop came in second with 259 clicks. Then Wondrous Strange was very well sort of teased, and a lot of people wanted to know more about that. The Melcat announcement, then 221 clicks. Then going on down through a number of different events. French macarons got 200 clicks, as well as Keegan's Quick Breads event. Keegan Rogers does from the Co-op. Is very popular presenter. And then our two most clicked items were The Big Sick, which is Kumali Nanjiani's movie that was just released on DVD that's there, as well as The Circle, which is the thing with Tom Hanks and Emma Stone about a Facebook-like evil sort of thing. For some reason, a lot of people wanted to click on that. So this is just a chart showing the number of subscriptions over time. We did truncate the all-important x-axis, so please notice it starts at 40,000. Okay, so I'm sorry, the y-axis, truncated the y-axis. So we didn't add anybody until the October 9th one so we could see what the fall off looked like. And basically, as you can see, about 100 to 200 people were unsubscribing each week. But then between the first week when we started adding people on and the following week, it's almost flat between new users coming in and people unsubscribing from it. So it's after just 2 weeks, it's about very steady at 43,000 users.
Can I ask a question, Eli? Did you also take off people who you were getting bounce notices for?
We get very few bounces because we've kind of pre-filtered for that. That's not subtracted from this. There's not a lot of bounces as far as it goes.
And I know it's difficult to say how many active card holders we have, but what's...
Actually, it's easy to say how many active card holders. We have about 60,000 people who've transacted business in the past year. So you got onto this list by having created an account on having logged into your account on AADL.org more recently than January of 2016, and not having unsubscribed from any of our other email newsletters. So if you unsubscribed from the annual report, or if you unsubscribed from something else, we didn't put you on this list. But then new users are automatically added to this list.
So 2/3 of our users are receiving this?
Yes.
Great.
Okay. Now the other thing is there's a lot of household accounts. So it's hard to say for sure how many individuals are represented by that. Okay, any questions about this? All right, so our next steps, A/B testing. We're going to start testing which parts of it are getting more clicks. We have some infrastructure that'll let us do that. Then we'll be doing a design update on the format of that. That's something Rich and his team are working on. And then we'll have a new method of approaching click tracking to get a little bit better data about how things are coming in to the website as far as that goes. And thanks to Rich for helping pull together this data for today's report. Any questions?
Do we know how much effort it takes to do this?
I was doing it up until this past week. It would take between the graphic designer, my time, and the developer's time, about 3 hours to put it together. It wasn't taking a lot of time because we had some infrastructure in place. So it would take the web developer an hour, the designer an hour, and then about an hour in copy editing. Any other questions?
When you start doing A/B testing, are you going to do the kind where it's in real time, or are you?
It's not going to change in real time so that we can see, but it will be for the same email, we'll be testing 2 different versions of it. We'll be able to see the clicks for each version, which one they say, but it won't reactively adjust the way that MailChimp does. It's mostly to inform the design update.
Design, yeah, right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you think this helps alleviate phone calls, or the number of phone calls made to the library? Or is it just...
Anecdotally, not remotely.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to.
I like the content. I wouldn't have known about the macaroon workshop otherwise, and I always want to go to everything and I can't, but just knowing that what's going on is always really interesting and helpful.
We have seen, and of course it's hard to attribute actions, but some events that have not been big in the past that have been highlighted in the newsletter have been big. College Night particularly has been a bit of a snoozer past couple of years, and we had 150 people this year. So, and it was highlighted, it was the first one in the events for that week. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Oh, one more thing. I forgot about this. So another part of cross-channel stuff is increasing voice and text integration. So we currently have an SMS custom short code, so a 5-digit code. It's for AADL or 42235. That has been used very well during the summer. The catch is 42235 always works on any device. 4AADL is not well supported on Android because it doesn't like combinations of letters and numbers. And it depends on what version of Android and all that sort of stuff. 4AADL works fine on iPhone. However, that short code costs $16,000 a year. So it's a major expense that we did a lot for promotion, but now we're seeing that now that we have these users in place, we're going to transition with the new website because there's a new feature from our SMS provider that they can redirect texts to your voice number. So you can have one phone number. So if they dial a voice call, 327-4200, it comes into the voice system. But if they text 327-4200, it's redirected to our texting infrastructure. So that will decrease the cost for this from $16,000 a year just for the code to $0 just for the code. We'll still pay the per text costs, which are a very small percentage of the portion. But 4ADL has kind of lived its life. Short codes are hardly a thing anymore. And now we can text everybody who uses 4ADL and say, January 2nd, 4ADL is changing to this number. So add it into your context because now you can call us or text us. Any questions about that?
That's awesome.
And that number that it's changing to again is what?
Our regular number, 327-4200.
Okay.
And then the other things that will be coming with the new website, we'll have a new opportunity to promote things. In the alerts and reminders and the notices, we'll have some new infrastructure to put one message at the bottom of all of those. We use that very lightly now, but with a lot of new notices coming out of the website, there'll be a lot of opportunity to highlight stuff at the bottom or at the top, some boilerplate that goes into a lot of different things. And also, then we'll be able to know what they're interested in and distribute that accordingly. I think that's it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eli.
Okay, so now we move on to the Bank of Ann Arbor, proposed investment policy. This is what Jim was foregrounding a moment ago.
Right. So Kathy Savoy is here from the Bank of Ann Arbor, if you don't mind. I'm sorry, Jim.
No, thank you.
And we've sort of given you your introduction and what you're here for. So I think if you just give us the background information, appreciate it.
Okay. So the policy, as you said, you can only buy bonds up to 1 year in maturity. I mean, you can buy, it has, the state law specifies the type of things you can buy, like CDs, U.S. Treasury notes, bonds issued by municipalities, but they don't specify the maturity. So generally, the longer the bond, the higher the interest rate that you can earn. And one thing you can do is you can still limit the maturity if you want to. If you think you're going to need the money, you can say 3 years, you can say 5 years, you can say 10 years, or you don't have to limit it at all. You can just make sure that the bank is informed anytime you need some money so that we know we can plan for it and provide that liquidity. Internally, we have our own investment policy where we won't buy bonds longer than a 10-year maturity unless our trust committee approves it, which in my 9 years at the bank, we've never done that. So you don't have to specify if you choose to just work with us and give us parameters on liquidity needs.
I'll give you an example of a time when when I let the bank know that we needed to have some liquidity. Is when the library purchased the purchase this building, final purchase for this building from the Ann Arbor Public Schools, because we needed a certain amount of money. And so I call and let the bank know that we were potentially going to do this and hope to be able to finalize it and by when, so that they could make those decisions so that that would happen, right?
So interest rates are very low right now, but they are increasing. So if you bought a 1-year bond right now, you'd earn 1.3%. If you bought a 10-year bond, these are just used Treasury notes, you would earn 2.3%. So you can earn a little bit more.
A very little bit more.
More. Do you need me to cover anything else?
Questions?
Kathy, can we talk through a couple scenarios that I think I understand? So if we were to remove our restriction on 1-year maturity rates, we could either just direct you, as Josie has done in the past, to say we need this much money by this date and put no restrictions in our policy and just talk about it with you. The other thing we could do would be put a restriction and we could say 5 years, elected to 4-year terms. We could decide that that was all we were comfortable with. And if we we had our money invested in 5-year bonds, but we unexpectedly realized in 2 years we were going to need some money for something, you could still sell those bonds, which might mean we would lose money and might mean we would not lose money based on what the bond market was doing, correct?
Correct. And we usually ladder them out. So by a ladder just means you buy a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year. So you have something maturing every year. So even if we say the maximum maturity is 10 years, we're not going to go buy all 10-year bonds.
Right. Right. Okay. And I'll just add to this for your information, we also have investments with Old National. And Old National, when I talked to them about this very same thing, 50% of what they have invested for us is out 10 years, or about 10 years. So it was, so not all of it, but half of it. So it's something that, and it's laddered as well, and the same type of thing. And they're coming to talk to the Finance Committee next week. So we're working to get everybody the policy. So
Are we equally invested in both banks?
No. You have more money in the Bank of Ann Arbor. The library has more money in the Bank of Ann Arbor than we have in Old National. But the board has always considered it prudent to have money in more than a bank, one bank. So it does. You will be presented with a policy change to vote on at the next board meeting. So just as we're considering it, so you're understanding what your options are. You may not specify any term at all because most of the law does that for you, or the bank does that for you, or you can cap it. So we're just asking that it be more flexible and generous than it is at 1 year.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, I think we see
So,
Eli again.
I'm sorry, before we move on. So Josie, just in terms of the process, are you're having the policy language reviewed?
I am. I'm having the policy language reviewed by our attorneys for also, so that whatever we bring for you to approve, I know that the applicable state public acts are accounted for properly and they're called out in the language so that there's no confusion about what public acts the library is complying with. I think, from what I understand, we're fine the way it is now, but whenever we're changing a policy that's founded in public acts, I make sure that we're good. So that's being done.
And I don't think the committee has a recommendation, so it's a matter of,
We discussed it loosely in very general terms.
That's right.
But then we processed it out as, let's make sure that we get recommendations from attorneys to make sure. I think we had talked about 5 years.
But I think the thing that was clear from the committee is that we were all comfortable with changing it. No one wanted to say, let's stick with the policy of 1 year.
Yes.
That was the part we all agreed on. But I don't think we had a consensus in any way about should we just allow it to be a matter of practice rather than policy, or 5 years or 10 years. So we'll have to talk about that more, but this also could be a chance for other people to weigh in if you're thinking, if you have strong feelings about it or
I mean, it does seem like if we already have some 10-year investments made carefully, and like you said, we could sell them if we needed to. So there would always be action in front of any 4-year term person.
Yeah.
You know, I don't see why we wouldn't. I don't see why we would go with 5.
Great, well, we'll vote on it next month,
Right.
right?
Let's look at the language.
Sounds good. So we see Eli again, I believe, to talk about a different financial aspect, fines.
So with the new website coming, as we talked about with a few of our previous presentations, there's an opportunity to make some changes to the policy to reflect some of the things that are happening with the way the collection is being used. So currently, we have 2 levels of overdue charges. One is that video and tools are $1 per day with a maximum of $10, and the other is everything else is 25 cents a day with a maximum of $10. Now, there's a line in the policy that says the maximum fine for anything is the value of the item, which makes a lot of sense. And currently, when you hit $10 of fine balance, of account balance, your access to your library account is cut off. You cannot renew items, you can't check out anything else. You can place holds, but they can't be filled. So, and our current, again in the policy currently says that at $40 of balance, the account is referred to our collection agency. Now, it's important to understand that the collection agency does not have the ability to impact somebody's credit. Okay, this is a collection agency, which is an external organization that sends a letter that helps get the stuff back. That's the goal, is getting the stuff back. However, this is a library service organization that does this service for many different libraries. They are not able to make any credit reports. So that's a good thing, because there's not a circumstance by which a debt to AADL can impact someone's credit. Okay, so that said, some of the challenges that we have with this current setup that we might consider, and is that the account cutoff is too low. At $10, if you check out 10 DVDs and they're all 1 day overdue, you're locked out. And because we have no limits on our checkouts, it's very easy for that to happen, especially for 10 kids DVDs. If you're going on a car trip, you're 1 day out, you can't renew anything because your account has been locked out. So it's easy to get caught in a catch-22. The other thing is that there's confusion about the reporting threshold. The $10 cutoff versus the $40 credit referral is a weird situation. It's difficult to describe, and it causes a lot of confusion for patrons. Another thing is that the dollar fine for DVDs is from an era when DVDs were valuable. DVDs are now very, very ubiquitous and very inexpensive. Most of the things in the collection, we paid $15 or $20 for them. Of course, the multi-volume set's more, but a lot of the feature films were very inexpensive, and we're treating them as if they are rare and precious. So that's another challenge. Then with the tools collection, the tools fine of $1 per day is not very effective in getting the thing back, especially with the $10 limit, because once you hit 10 days overdue, there's zero incentive to bring it back to the library until the bill arrives 45 days later. And then you fall out of your chair realizing that you checked out a $1,200 synthesizer from the library and now it's been charged to you. So the one other thing that we're considering is with the tools collection, we have constant demand for reserving an item for a particular date. And as I've said, we had no idea when we launched the tools collection what a role it would play in people's weddings. But we have constant requests for the big outdoor toys for outdoor weddings. Usually it dries up in September. This year it has not dried up in September. So we are having a lot of demand for specific dates. We've been trying to accommodate them as best we can, but the system doesn't support it. There's not really a mechanism for it. So those are some of the things that we might want to address going forward. And what we'll do is we'll discuss this a little bit here tonight for about 10 minutes. Then we'll bring a policy proposal for next month's meeting for you to consider and edit and such. So we'll have the discussion here. So there's a few more things to consider as part of revising this policy document. We currently have that if you own a business or the director of a nonprofit in the district, that you can get a card for the business at no charge. And it says in the policy that W-2 employees of an organization that has an office in the district can get cards as well. Now, the procedure has been that the organization, the owner of the business or the director of the organization has to sign for that has to sign for the card. That, as you can imagine, is a little tricky to do. And the reality is we send the bills to the person who signed up for the card anyway. So it's something to consider as we're making these revisions, is do you want to change that and allow people who work within the district to apply directly for a library card? It would certainly result in many more library cards. Recently, we had an issue with the University of Michigan where for years we had provided cards to department members when the department head would sign for them. Well, someone in the finance department asked the finance department head if they could do this, and he said, "Are you crazy?" And we basically had a communication with Josie that said, U of M department heads are not empowered to do this for their members. So we recently had to stop offering library cards to people who do not live in the district but work for the university. So that's something that a policy change could address. Any questions about that? Okay.
Wait, one
Yep.
second. So Eli, we're talking about the kind of cards, the W-2 employees of local businesses.
Yes.
They're not getting the out-of-district cards, they're getting cards for free.
They're getting cards for free because if the owner or director of the organization is willing to sign for them currently. Okay. So, and the idea is that that person is on the hook for their,
right.
But logistically, that's not really a easy thing to enforce because that's not who's actually got their name on the card and the contact information.
So what we're suggesting is that if a business is in our community, they're paying taxes.
Yeah, theoretically.
And so, and if people.
Not except U of M.
Well, and I said a business. At least I know that, what they are, what they aren't technically. That's the question, because we wouldn't want to exclude U of M.
Right.
And so that's the question. You would have a lot more people using you would have a lot of cards. It could impact, it could change your non-resident fee card sign up as well. So it's
How much do we get for non-resident fees signups?
The fee is $150 and it is payable quarterly, $37.50.
But how much of our?
There's very few. I mean, typically we had, if I remember correctly, between 300 and 400 cards per year. So it's not a very large number of
But
people.
we
who sign
give
up.
cards to out-of-town people or out-of-district people who teach in the public school system.
Correct.
all
That's
schools
correct.
and all schools in our district, not only
Yeah.
public schools, but anyone
Well,
who's
okay,
all schools.
That is also fairly rare.
And students in schools get
Yep.
cards as well.
Anyone who has an address within the district, yeah.
Well,
and the students,
no,
yes,
students.
even if they don't.
Students.
Even
yes.
if they don't, if
Yep.
they're a
Yep.
student
Correct.
in our district, they are eligible for a card.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a tough one. I mean, I think it would be enormously popular, but I wonder if people would feel it was unfair who pay taxes if university people were able to get cards without. paying
Well, they were for
taxes.
years until we had this communication from them.
So how will we announce this if we do it?
Well, it's just be part of what we talk about when people come up to the desk, because most people assume that they can get a card. The notion that you have to live in the district is a fairly uncommon one for people approaching the desk. Many people are not aware, because for libraries that aren't district libraries, they generally don't have those restrictions and issue a card
A
to
public
anyone.
library is a public library.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that common, Eli? I mean, can I show up in Boston and get a library card there?
Generally, yes. For public libraries that are city or county funded,
But
it's
not
fairly
district.
rare for them to do it that way. It's more the property tax funded directly libraries
Which
that
we are.
make that distinction.
So there are two things we're talking about, two ideas we have now probably 6 minutes to talk about. The
Yes.
latter idea, I'm interested to know what you think about this. My instinct is, just let everyone get a library card, right? Does anyone have oh no, we can't let everyone get a library card. Does anyone have that gut reaction? So the downsides to saying yes, being more inclusive, are there downsides?
I mean,
Our audience would grow and our dollars wouldn't.
Well, yeah, that's a
I mean,
obvious
that's the sort
downside,
of
but it's a
hard
public
truth of it.
service, it's not a business, so, but yes, that's an
Downside.
obvious hard truth. Demand and service provision without income.
Would it require additional staff for us to think about, no?
I don't
We're
think so.
doing it
I mean,
now.
it would be a wild success if this netted like 2,000 additional library cards. That would be really, but that's a small percentage increase of the user base. And it's hard to anticipate how intensely they would or wouldn't use it. You know, there's all kinds of actions that can result in similar changes.
And of course, we provide plenty of services which you don't have to have a library card for, right?
Yes.
There's no program for which you need a
Everything
library.
except loaning
And,
or borrowing.
and Melcat, of course, I mean, we all get
Right.
materials from libraries that aren't our home library. So in
Right.
that sense, I mean,
But we're paying for that service. The library
are.
pays a fee to be involved in that.
do we have
That's-
to pay more if we have more cards?
No.
No.
How much do the cards cost?
The cards themselves?
Kidding.
Very low. One other thing to consider this is there are two other places in the policy, one in specifically relation to claims returned when it says in the policy that we cannot accept a claims returned, meaning when someone says, no, I returned that, take it off my account. It says in the policy we cannot accept that after someone has been billed for the item.
Okay.
However,
That's totally happens.
we do it all the time.
Yeah, we do it all the time.
And then there's one about that if you refund an item, then you only get your refund minus the maximum fine. We're not doing
We're
that
not
one
doing
either.
that, yeah.
So there's a couple things here that are more restrictive in actual practice, and it's one of those moments where you consider, is this procedure or is this policy? Where it's something that you decide to set that language in a different place.
So you would, and rightly so, like our procedures and our policies to line up.
Well, we'd like the policy to leave operational things to procedure, to set the values in the
Right.
policy,
Right.
and not worry about the customer service judgments, especially because, you know, there's a lot of legitimate reasons why someone might not have known that their item was really billed until it was billed.
Right. Okay.
Is any of this a substantial financial impact? I mean, this is all just,
Not in terms of the claims returned and in terms of the refundability. I mean, of course, a fine change can have an impact. The challenge is it's hard to anticipate that because it's hard to know what behavioral impact it'll have. Also, we have a lot of data about fines paid. We don't have a lot of data about fines outstanding.
I think Jim had a question.
If you're going to ask us for a policy change, I think we actually have to look at
Absolutely
the real impact. So I would just, and I would also, I mean, because that, if we also decided to make a change towards, people who work in the district, particularly the university, like we want to figure out how to communicate about that. I don't actually know how I would come down on this issue right now, to be perfectly honest. I need to see some of the information in front of me in a concrete way.
The library cards, not the fines.
The library cards.
Okay.
yeah.
We knew you would. I mean, this was
Yeah.
just the beginning. This is bringing.
This is to enable us to develop that material.
Because I mean, I'm also just thinking about what it means to go to a community and potentially ask for a bond in the near future and be giving library cards to people who work at the university that do not participate in the tax structure of the
Right.
city, which is always an issue. And because, I mean, and you're theorizing that we would see, you know, a significant increase in that kind of a library card. So it's just, I just want to be very prudently considering that.
I think the university is a little bit of a red herring because we were doing it for so long. It's actually more the people who would never have asked their boss or owner of the business to sign for their card who could now get one without having to ask.
And there's really no way to know, of course.
Right.
But I would also, if again, I want to have my cake and eat it too. So if we're going to move in that direction, I want to be able to understand how we can communicate about that as an asset to the community and to our organization. And I just like, as far as fines go, I actually sort of wonder about the radical position of just no fine structure.
We knew someone would
whatsoever.
bring that up.
Yeah, and I mean, and you knew it would be me probably.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
There are libraries doing it. They have different funding structure. You're talking about $250,000 or more dollars out of your budget if you do that.
Is that how much we lose and lost?
That's not lost items. Those are overdue fines. Understand we waive a couple $100,000 a year in fines as well. We're very generous about that. Fines are used effectively to get material back. That's what they do. I would argue against eliminating fines for that very reason. That's what you have to get material back.
Well, and we have such an efficient way of letting people know.
And we're very good about that up front, ahead of time knowledge. We'll do better with that even with the new site where people can manipulate their account and manage their whole list so they don't have things out. So I would argue against eliminating fines.
I agree.
Is there a leadership position to take here, though, that would allow us to say, design a kind of algorithm that deals with demand in the system? So, for example, if I have an item that nobody wants, like I'm reading, like I have Virginia Woolf Orlando in my, on my bookshelf, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I've had it for like, a year and a half, and nobody has asked for it.
It's technically challenging in some ways. I think the harder thing is how to communicate that so people know what their expectations are. We have an issue now with people wanting to know whether or not their item is renewable. And we can take a guess at whether or not it's renewable based on the initial circumstances, but it's hard to say that definitively. I will say I have not seen a library that has gone fine-free that also offers unlimited renewals.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I think some people think of their fines, like me, as donations to the library.
Yes. Yeah,
and I think I like the position of being flexible so that the staff have the ability to look at someone and see this person is not in a position to pay this fine, and if they might walk away and not come back from the library, versus someone like me who's just irresponsible. But also things like
that's the president of the library board confessing to this online through streaming live video.
I also have a DVD of Bill Nye the Science Guy for over a year, and I tried to pay it back, and they said, "Oh no, you can keep it." So I'm very excited about the DVD policy.
I am too.
I want to second the DVD policy. It's onerous. And I think we can all echo that. So in terms of your process for creating new policy and coming back to us with recommendations, do you need anything from the board in terms of being collaborative on the development piece? What's the process?
I think that this conversation has given us what we need to bring a proposal next time that can then we'll put more time on the agenda, it can be hashed out. And it does, if we're not able to approve in November, it can be approved in December for a January 2nd effective date.
Knowing what is coming at us, okay, great. So we can have a follow-up conversation next month if we need to, but we'll also know what's coming at us before the meeting in terms of your recommendations, so we can do a little background reading. Okay. That's great.
We appreciate the long lead on this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow, we're going to take you all right to the end here. Okay, so now we move on to Epic MRA. You've been all very patient, especially those of you waiting to speak, so thank you.
And I just introduced John Cavanaugh to those of you who have not met him before from Epic MRA. And thank you, John, very much for your time this evening.
My pleasure. The director asked if I wouldn't do a reprise, at least a shorter one, of the 2016 presentation, together with some comparative things that I added at the end. We are going to be conducting a survey on behalf of the district library in early next year, and hope to be working with you beginning fairly soon on crafting some questions. Much of that will be driven by architects' reports and so forth, but nevertheless we can start to frame things out so we can hit the ground running in 2018. We have conducted surveys on behalf of the library since 2012 and do it 2014, 2016. We will look forward to the 2018 survey as well. The last two most recent ones have focused primarily on customer satisfaction and trying to ferret out to give some guidance to the board and to the staff as to areas to work on, concentrate on, what people might have problems with, what can we do better, what are we doing well, etc. This 2016 survey was designed to track some changes from prior interviews, and it used a live operator telephone methodology We contacted 500 residents of the Ann Arbor School District, which is the jurisdiction of the district, and incorporated in this survey 30% cell phone contact, and conducted that in mid to late February. The overall margin of error for that, if you want your eyes to glaze over with statistical numbing statistics, is 4.4%. I stuck in the subset margins of error because in our analysis, we will go through a fairly comprehensive demographic report. The questionnaire itself contains a battery of demographic questions against which you can then see, all right, are people in Pittsfield thinking differently than the rest? And so those subset margins of error are, obviously, I didn't get 500 interviews from Pittsfield. Okay? Doesn't make up the whole district. Same with any other demographic, gender, income, education level, etc. The major findings, we have included this since 2012. We always ask, in return for what you get in local services, are your taxes too high, too low, or are they about right?
Sorry, did you, library taxes or taxes?
The initial question was local taxes, local services. And when asked which local service provided the greatest value for them, only public education beat you as providing the greatest value. There was an increase from the 2014 measurement in the number of respondents who were able to identify how you are funded. There was concern that there was a lack of understanding of that, and some effort was made, as I understand it, in newsletters, and that showed up in the survey. Not only in this, but in other questions. That final bullet point is to your question, was that library taxes. And I have a graphic that does a better job of explaining that for you. You have a fairly high percentage of residents who say they have visited a facility in the past year. We just came out of Romeo District Library over in northern Macomb County, and that was in the high 50s, as opposed to the 84% you have here. Being a university town, that has something to do with it. Nevertheless, it's a fairly high percentage. And they do so with a great deal of frequency, at least a few times a month. And a quarter of those who said they visited in the past year every day or every more than once a week. This facility remains the most visited. However, there is a fairly decent distribution across your several facilities within the district, more or less correlating to population concentrations, which only serves to make sense. Notwithstanding the fact that the vast majority of people believe that the internet has not made libraries obsolete, among those who do not visit, I have the internet at home, I get everything online, no need, no desire, which in my opinion are related answers, or I don't have the time. Well, if you thought you had to go to the library, you'd make the time, obviously. And it's among this subset that we will often give the demographic breakdown a little extra scrutiny. How do you receive information about the library? What's the best way to communicate with these people who are not regular visitors? And that partakes of a great deal of a report on a customer satisfaction survey of this type. They find it is easy to get what they're after, and most of them do it online for a later pickup. Thank you. There was some concern, or at least not a concern, a question: do people feel comfortable asking staff for assistance? 88% said that it was very likely that they would ask if they couldn't find it on their own.
They must be female.
Possibly. And there was also a notion that, all right, can we make attendance, encourage greater attendance or encourage non-visitors to come? And not really, by amending the physical spaces. And for instance, adding a cafe was not a particularly hot item.
It will be interesting to see what the answer to that is next time.
Indeed.
Yeah, in the post-Westgate
Post-Westgate
environment.
Yep. So, getting back to those bullet points in graphic form, that's a distribution of the facilities that are visited. And the yellow bars are, again, the 16% who said they have not visited in the past year. And in graphic form, visitation. It's a high percentage of people who do it at least monthly. Your visitors are regular patrons. Perception of local tax burden. This is an interesting one. There was a time when a total answer of, the question asked, in return for what you receive in local services, do you think, government services, do you think your taxes are too high, too low, or about right? If the respondent says too high, we follow up, would that be much or just somewhat? And the dual colored bar on the far left gives you the total percentage too high at 26, 8% of whom said very much too high. In 2014, however, that total was 29, and nearly half of it was much too high. In 2012, that total percentage was 33% too high. 16%, again, nearly half of it being the more intense, much too high. It is no coincidence that we're coming off the recession of 2008 and just the tail end of it in 12. And people are finally getting back on their feet a little bit in 14. We see this in school district surveys all across the state. This is a common question, and it gives a little bit of an atmospheric read of what's the sensitivity to a request for more tax revenue. There was a time, pre-recession era, when 26% would have been a little iffy. Since the recession, 26% is good. That is on the lower end of what you might expect as a reasonable amount. You get into the mid to high 30s, you have a pretty tough row to hoe if you're asking for a tax increase. In contrast, what's your perception of the library tax burden in particular? A negligible 11%, and more to the point, too low. I'm getting more than I'm paying for, is the response there. You'll usually end up in school districts and in other taxing jurisdictions, somewhere around 2, 3, 4% at best. It is somewhat remarkable that 12% realize that they are getting a lot for their money. But again, as it was in the earlier slide on overall local tax burden, that total tax burden was considered too high in 14, and it went down considerably in 16. So your comparison versus overall, you are in good shape in terms of that atmospheric. People don't believe they're being gouged.
So
Again,
that's when to look at, yes, it's about time and about income and recession, but it's the Westgate impact on that number, perception of too low. It will be interesting to see what that changes, if it changes.
Mm-hmm.
This is the question concerning ease of finding what you are after. No one said it was very difficult. In the vast majority, even a 1 or a 2 on a 1 to 5 scale. This is the method by which they obtain their desired items. And would these influence you very much, somewhat, only a little, or not at all? If the district added meeting rooms, play spaces, etc., and that's in a ranked order of total influence to visit more often. We put together a battery of, what was it, 4 or 5 different programs and services. Did you know about it first? And among those who knew about it, did you use it? And if you used it, were you satisfied with it? And that's the rank ordering of awareness of the things we tested. Among those who are aware, that's the rank ordering of use. So interestingly, not a lot of people were aware of pulp.org, but of those who were aware, they had the highest use level. And there's your comparison of awareness to use. As you can see, only the art and science equipment had, was the one where use was less than awareness among those who were aware. I know about it, I just don't use it. And quite satisfied with, on the, again, a scale of 1 to 5. I mislabeled that, sorry. That's not a 0, it's going to be 1 to 5. Where 1 is not satisfied at all and 5 is very satisfied. Overall, judging the qualities and services of the Ann Arbor District Library, would you give it a positive rating of excellent or pretty good, or a negative rating of just fair or poor?
Wait. The green is pretty good or fair, and the yellow is
No.
excellent or poor?
There are gradations of positive and negative. For the positive, the gradations are excellent and pretty good. So on the far left bar, you have a total of 94% giving you a positive rating, 59% of which is excellent.
It was excellent. We just have no poors. Okay.
2% said negative. Nobody said poor. It was a more tepid negative response. In 2012, by contrast, you had an 82% rating.
We were pretty happy about that.
Yeah. And that's the comparison of your satisfaction ratings between 16 and 12. I picked 12 because that survey asked about if the Ann Arbor District Library were to put a proposal on an upcoming ballot, and then went on to describe briefly what it might be, would you vote yes or no? And I'll get to those slides in a minute. But again, I get back to that sensitivity to taxes and the differential between 2012, 2014, and 2016, and how that had gone down, that my taxes are too high response over the years. And that has been our experience in school districts and any other transportation districts, any of the taxing jurisdictions we've done surveys for throughout the state. It is a common theme over time. And that's why I put the top issue history. One of the other atmospherics we will ask at the outset is, I'm going to read a list of issues for you. Could you tell me which one stands out for you as the most important? 2012 are the red bars. You can see library quality is not, and expectedly doesn't show up very high. However, the economy and jobs in 2012, and if you recall, in 2014, all the publicity and all the news was about the sad state of our roads and bridges. And there it shows up as 35%. Again, local taxes, these things don't measure much, but the economy and jobs dropped to 16% from 29% in 12 as a top issue of concern in a prompted list. There you have a 7-point drop in total. More importantly, the intensity of it about local tax burden. We didn't happen to ask a library-specific tax question in 12, so I don't have one to compare for you. And as I mentioned, after going through some of the atmospheric questions, asked, would you vote yes or no on a $65 million bond issue for improvements? That means the board would ask for 0.69 mils for the owner of a $200,000 home with $100,000 taxable value. That translates into $69 annually as an increased tax. Knowing this, would you vote yes or no? If the person responds immediately, either yes or no, then they are in the solid category. A solid yes at 45%, a solid no at 33%. If they say they're undecided, our interviewer is instructed to press a little bit and say, well, if the election were held today, would you lean yes or would you lean no? Leaners, particularly yes leaners, are notoriously unreliable yes voters. So, and the rule of thumb, typically, in ballot questions is you like to have 60%. That's only half the equation. You like to be over a majority in the solid column too. So among those people who said no to that question, we followed up with, well, if the library presented a scaled back version asking for 0.51 mils, translating into $51 annually for a tax on a home with a taxable value of $100,000, would you vote yes or no? You moved up a little bit. Still not above a majority solid yes. That's what reducing the millage rate produced. A 3-point total, but only 2-point in solid. You're still not over a 50% majority solid yes. Well, among the no voters on the 0.51, well, how about a further scaled back to 0.25, costing $25 a year? Would you vote yes or no? Only then you get a bare majority of 51% solid yes. I take you back to the atmospherics. My local taxes are too high at 33%. My biggest concern is the economy and jobs. To roll out a request, even at 0.25 mils, got this sort of response. And that's it.
And we know what happened.
Wow, that's a lot to think about and to digest. It's really helpful to hear it that way rather than just reading through the PDFs, I think. Yes.
Well, I left my crystal ball in Lansing. I don't know what 2018 is going to bring.
Yeah.
I do know that there will be an open seat for governor. Plenty of open seats in the state Senate and state House, thanks to term limits. There will be very active campaigns, and who knows what's going to happen on the national level. We do what we can, measuring the atmospherics as far as sensitivity to local taxes, sensitivity and an assessment of worth of Ann Arbor District Library for the tax dollars spent. But many other items influence things. The best we can do, provide for you, is to try to zero in on how do we get to solid yes. Everything else is out of my control and yours, for that matter, as far as how the campaigns shape up. What I do know is that typically in even year November general elections, and even more so in presidential year November general elections, ballot questions tend to have a better go at it. They're much higher turnout elections. The anti forces are diluted. That isn't a universal truth, but it is a general rule of thumb. Unfortunately, the downside of those is that you get swallowed up in the massive amounts of campaign advertising for higher visibility races. Right. So what that argues for is a very robust analysis in demographics. Who are persuadable? Who moves from undecided to yes, or who moves from no to undecided? What messages incorporated into that survey moved them? Who are they? How old are they? Are they mostly men? Are they mostly women? What's their education level? So you have a notion of how to construct your messages. A wide variety of items that can be picked apart and looked at to be of assistance in that. Typically in a school district survey where they are asking for a bond, we will lay out the components. This $65 million will pay for the following. New heating and air conditioning unit at the cost of $10 million. All the elementary schools will get new windows and doors. You lay out the components and see which ones are, no matter how you're voting on the overall issue, do you support or oppose that particular element? Gives you an idea what does and doesn't ring bells out there. We can also line up proponents of this, say, and line up 4 or 5 advocacy arguments, irrespective of whether you voted yes or no. Is that a very or somewhat convincing argument or not a convincing argument at all? And then line up the opponent's arguments with the same question. You can then pinpoint components of your plan that may or may not have public reception and arguments both for and against that may or may not resonate with, and then with whom. You cross-tabulate that against the demographic battery, and it gives a yes committee the guidance it needs in formulating a message and to whom to send it.
Do we have we taken some of the survey results and compared them to how voters voted on the bond according to geographic by townships or by?
You have that. I mean, you can look at that from the voter demographic, but the library didn't. We did not do that after it failed.
Okay.
You can. We did know. Actually, we did look. I'm going to look at Eli. We actually did know where it failed, like wholesale failed. Right. So we had that information. We could tell. We did a surface look. We didn't go down into it in terms of male, female, or voters or anything like that. But we did. We looked at it in terms of wards.
Wards, right.
Yes, we did. Yep. Yep. The other thing we knew at the time that was interesting is that 10,000 people who voted did not vote on the issue of the library bond at all. So not any vote at all. I mean, it was a turn over the ballot because it was a whole lot, but it wasn't the only thing on the back.
Right.
And so we had 10,000 people who didn't vote.
That's
on it.
interesting.
And so that was interesting. So we did know that.
Okay.
Were the wards in town pretty much equal? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Honestly, don't remember. No. I mean, there
It's
was
been a while, so we should
I
look
don't
at the
want to
data.
guess. I don't want to guess at that. So yeah.
No, but that's interesting, because I would guess that the closer in would be more positive, but.
It was more of a socioeconomic strata than it was a distance strata.
Location.
Yep. Yep.
And if they stayed on the ballot.
Yep. And that's right.
The drop-off is another concern you have with even your November elections.
People were voting
There's a
for
lot of stuff on the ballot.
Yes,
Right.
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, we all had to run for office. I don't think we ever figured out how many people didn't vote for library board, but I'm sure there were lots of people.
You
Yeah,
can.
we certainly could. I mean,
Yeah, you could.
you can easily look at those numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, total voter turnout versus total vote for library board.
It's a little harder because they pick 3 kind of thing. You don't know if one person voted for one or.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, right.
It actually,
Okay.
I think you can't figure that out, but you could come up with some number.
Right.
That was very helpful. And it was, I started to read through this data and having the comparative between 2012 and 16 helped give a really nice snapshot. Learned a lot. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, reading that report can be drier than a biscuit sometimes.
It's pretty
Thank you.
interesting if you like data points.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the trip down, Joe.
Okay, home stretch, everyone.
3.3.
Yeah.
Our
so-
favorite.
Yeah, we move on to 3.3. Yeah, so we're going to move on now to a report from O'Neill Construction.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So this, Will Gordon, CEO of O'Neill. Thank you very much, Will, for being here this evening. And I prefaced it earlier that we're not talking dollar amounts tonight. You're just bringing everybody up to speed on where we are.
I don't have any slides.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
No, we don't have a lot of information yet. We're continuing to work with Len, the Director of Facilities, to go through this existing building and kind of figure out how all your parts and pieces are working. We've spent a lot of time. So what we're doing is developing 4 different scenarios, 4 different cost estimates for you to review. Number 1 is the existing building. We'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb. We're looking at all your mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, your building envelope. You know, you have some masonry problems that have to be taken care of. And then the typical things like when you're going to have to replace the roof and the flashings that go with it. So we're spending a lot of time on that. We'll put together a 20-year capital expenditures plan for this building, basically to repair, replace, and maintain what you have. And then scenario 2 would be to take this existing building and renovate it from top to bottom without any major structural changes. So I'm not sure it'll meet all of the needs that you have for programming, but it would be a renovated building, the building that you have now, the existing building, new on the interior.
Your attention, please. The library will close in 15 minutes. The internet stations will automatically shut off at 8:55 p.m. Please make any final copies at this time and take all materials to be checked out to a self-check station or to the circulation desk by 8:55 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, I'll hurry up.
We will not be locked in.
Okay. So scenario 3 would be the demolition of this building, taking it all the way down and building a brand new library on this piece of property. And then the 4th, which the 2 most difficult things for us to put numbers together on are scenario 1, which is taking this existing space and trying to keep everything running and showing you how to pay for that over 20 years. That's tough. We're working on it. The second most difficult is number 4, scenario 4, where we're trying to decide, you know, what part of this structure, these structures that you have now, would you save, and how do you make it work with a new addition that may surround it, go next to it, on top of it, or you know, there's several different options with the addition. So those are the 4 things we're working on. We are planning on wrapping up our numbers at the end of this month. So we'd like to get something to the group before the next meeting, so you have something to look at, and then I'll be back with slides at the next meeting. All right?
Thank you.
Any questions?
Questions?
I have a question. So in terms of the scope that you've been given with replacing the building, I mean, when you talk about replacing the building, same square footage, different configuration?
I believe it would be slightly more square footage. But the nice part about what we're going to do is we're going to give you square foot numbers. Like we have historical data, we have current data. We just received estimates for another library that was out on the streets, what we call out on the streets, out for bid here recently. So we have that data, and you know, if we started with 150,000 square feet, we can massage that and make it smaller or larger from there.
So I think what you're saying too is you're kind of coming up with a number that you can give us an estimate on, but a number that would fit on our existing lot. So you're not going to give us a 1 million square foot library that wouldn't fit on our lot.
Oh, correct.
And would you prioritize the work too? I mean, in terms of if the roof was to go first in the next 20 years, or I'm thinking maybe the septic tanks.
That kind of capital expenditures, we are planning to show you, hey, we think the first thing should be the boiler, and then in 2020, you ought to hit the roof. We're gonna lay it out like that for you.
I'm especially keen on the septic tanks.
Plumbing is important.
Yeah, you have
That's my favorite
sewage
topic.
ejection system here that needs some attention.
But is some of that the
right
city's
attention.
responsibility?
The city's
Is
responsibility.
it all the library's responsibility, or is there a situation underneath where we are built that is also a problem?
Well, I think, and we're not done looking into this, but I think that the biggest problem are the ejector pumps and then your lead out to the city main. I think the city main is fine. So yeah, I believe it's the library's responsibility.
But the most recent sewage problem we had was related to the city's infrastructure, not our own, right?
No, what happened was there was work going on
Right.
out on the street by contractors for the city. They hit the pipe that runs from us to them.
Our feeder pipe.
Our pipe. Our pipe was clay. And any ping just shattered it.
Right.
So it's our pipe.
So if it had been newer infrastructure, it might still have been hit, but it wouldn't have been broken.
Likely not.
Okay.
And it would have been bigger and a whole lot of other things. But yes, it's our pipe that was broken.
By the city.
Correct. And they fixed it.
Okay.
But there are newer technologies around this, yes, around septic tanks. I think our clay pipes are how old?
Yes, they're old, and I won't make you answer that. The other thing to understand is the way our sewage leaves this building is also part of the problem about how it goes out into the street, and that we have places that create difficulty when you have a blockage to make that work. So it backs up, and that's why the backups are in these bathrooms upstairs up in the front, because they go straight out. All the other restrooms in the building go down into the basement septic pumps. This bathroom does not. Am I right? Right. So there is a curve. It's a curve. It's not a T. There's a curve, and that is where large items that are placed in toilets that shouldn't be in toilets can get hung up in that space. And if you add multiple large items that shouldn't be put in the toilet, and then over time, you have a backup. And those are that's backups due to a design problem.
And increased usage makes that worse.
Right. And the other part of this is these are bathrooms that were put in these buildings in 1958, 1977, and then not many more in 1990. So, and then we have over 500,000 visits a year in this building. That's a tremendous amount of visitation in a space with so few toilets.
So I think what you're probably gathering is it's safe to assume that we have relatively low tolerance for risk in the sewage department.
Yes. Everything all comes down to bathrooms. Everyone knows that, right?
Is this the fourth meeting in a row that we've talked
That's
about
what I was
sewage?
gonna say.
I think Lynn brought it up.
I think she did. I think she's playing
to
to
make
her
sure
audience.
that we hit it out of the park on.
Oh, we went on a tour, so.
Yes, we
yes,
took a
did.
selfie
We did.
with the sewage problems.
After it was cleaned and cleared.
Okay.
Although I am very interested to see, actually, I was wondering if I know we have monitors on these things, but it'd be interesting if we could actually get like a live video feed.
You mean sort of like people watching baby birds get
Yeah,
born in nests?
totally,
We're going to watch the sewage crops.
To get the
at
total
AADL.
experience.
The pump came on while they were standing there, and I was so hoping it worked. I mean, I wanted to make sure this thing works. We're standing in that space.
Okay.
So we're very excited, thank you. Yes.
I have two questions.
Okay.
Not related to sewage. In option 4, when you're considering an addition, is that sort of an overlap with the option of renovation? I mean, does that presume that only an addition, or does it presume both an addition and a
renovation of the existing, what's left of the existing, and
plus a wraparound structure or something?
Exactly.
And then when you are making the determination of demolition and new building, and you're speccing that out, did we, Josie, make a recommendation of space, or are you just
No.
making a presumption
He's
based
look-
on what we have now?
We're gonna make a presumption based
Okay.
on what we think would be the right piece of structure to.
Got it.
Now, these are just numbers, though. I mean, we're not designing anything.
Right.
And like I said earlier, you can apply that number. You know, if we take the renovation number and you decide you want, 85,000 square feet left in place and renovated, we'll just apply that number to that 85,000. Make sense?
So I just have one more comment about the numbers. I think in town, people get a little bit, well, a lot of folks rightfully get worried about large numbers associated with public works. And then for some of us, we have a little bit more context, so we know, say, at a local high school, the roof was, I think, 5 million in renovations just to repair the roof. So when you present the numbers, is there any way that you can give us context? You were saying that you're aware of another library that's in a similar situation. Can you give us like comparative numbers?
I can tell you that a similar library locally here has just come in at about $300 per square foot.
Okay.
Whoa.
That's brand new out of the ground with demolition of the existing.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm sorry,
That's
what's our square footage on this library today?
110,000 square feet.
Big number. Any other questions?
Well, I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for you next time.
Yes.
I'm sure you will. I'll buckle up.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, we're almost gonna do it. We might even beat the next 5-minute warning. Okay. So we have a resolution recognizing October 15 to 21. Would someone like to read it?
Sure.
It is on page 3031.
Your attention, please.
Hang on a
The
second.
library will close in 5 minutes. If you have materials to check out, please go to a self-check station or to the circulation desk now. Thank you.
All right, Jamie, you want me to read all the whereases?
Oh my goodness. Let's see what we got here. Wow.
It's fine. I
What
can
do we
talk
think?
fast.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, whereas the Friends of the Ann Arbor District Library, established by local citizens in 1953, recognizes the critical importance of a securely established public library and has provided loyal and consistent support for the development of our highly respected district library system. Whereas the Friends has continuously raised funds and resources for the district library, thereby providing support for programming, equipment, collections, special educational events and exhibits, and outreach to the community. Whereas the work of the Friends highlights on an ongoing basis the fact that our library is a cornerstone of the community's access to education and enrichment and aims to encourage everyone from small children to senior citizens to engage in the joy of lifelong learning through use of the library's resources. Whereas the Friends understand the critical importance of public awareness of the library's needs and resources and endeavors to sustain community support for the district library and its collections and services. Whereas the Friends' gift of their time and commitment to the Ann Arbor District Library demonstrates the way that volunteerism leads to positive civic engagement and the betterment of our community. Now wherefore, be it resolved that the Ann Arbor District Library Board of Trustees proclaims October 15th through 21st, 2017 as Friends of Libraries Week in Ann Arbor, County of Washtenaw, Michigan, and urges everyone to join the Friends of the Ann Arbor District Library and thank them for all they do to make our library and community so much better. Resolved further that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded.
Thank you so much. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And I believe there is someone from the Friends here tonight.
Melanie Baldwin, who's the bookshop manager, who is here with Battle the Owl.
Battle the Owl.
Yep.
Our wonderful mascot. We thank you very much. We love you guys.
Well, we thank you
Love
and
it.
Faddle and all of the members of the Friends. I believe Josie's a member of the Friends. So, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great.
Can
All
I
right.
just say this was much more poetic than our usual resolution?
Yes, it was very
Well,
nicely done.
I was at the Friends meeting when our resolution was read to them last year. And they really do appreciate it. And this one expresses our appreciation even more.
Last year's resolution is hanging in the bookshop. And if this one is delivered the exact same way, I will just replace them.
Yeah, so we'll get it to you the same way. Yep.
Thank you.
So there's one more resolution to do. You want to do it? Oh, man. All right.
Did you want to do it?
Yes, but I'll just talk after. Go for it.
Okay. Or you can read it and I can talk after. I'll read it. The board resolves that it would like to officially thank Ira Lax for his service as an employee from March 22nd, 1999 to October 30th, 2017 of the Ann Arbor District Library. That all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded.
I'll be happy to second that.
I want to hear why you wanted to read it.
Because I have known Ira Lax since I met him at Frog Island when he was hosting a jazz panel. That man could do anything. And I have interacted with him when I worked at the ARC, and he represented the library so incredibly well, and I saw that on the outside looking in. He's just collaborative partner and so easy to work with and always moving forward. How do we get kids more involved? He's been part of a fantastic team, and he's represented that team really well.
I worked with Ira 10 years ago when I worked for Terry in Outreach and Neighborhood Services, and I think Ira is outreach. Like, he just, all the way down into his soul, he embodies what the library wants to do when they do outreach. He used to do library songsters, so he would get people to sing. He would take the library on the road to like different senior organizations, and I think he embodies what we want to be for the community. He's given so much of himself to this organization, so we wish him the best.
One more thing. He's the only person I know whose name is a sentence.
The library is now closed.
Yeah.
Say it again. Say it again.
He's the only person I know whose name is a sentence.
I relax.
I relax.
Yes. And it's the best sentence.
Aw, that's a nice way to end this meeting. Yeah. Hey, we totally did it. It's 9 o'clock.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Are there citizens comments?
Oh, yes, I forgot. Oh, there might be more citizens' comments. Okay, we're really close. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay. Karen, do we have some more people signed up?
Appreciate the time, guys. I know everybody's trying to get out of here, so I'll be brief. My name is Rami. I'm with All Inclusive. We were the previous custodial company. We stopped working a couple days ago, but after reviewing the video from the last meeting, even though I wasn't here, we felt compelled that we wanted to come and talk a little bit just to clear the air. We felt that we were misrepresented a little bit with what was said that ultimately led to us leaving, but again, we just wanted to clear the air. So I know I only have a few minutes. First, I wanted to clear up that I am a co-owner. Andrew Parker, see behind me, is actually a co-owner. He is not a supervisor. So each time that Andrew did respond, he was actually talking for the company. He could make changes as will. So I'm not sure what was about it that had them perceive that he was a supervisor rather than an owner. But I know that was one of the big things that ended up leading to us. So that's one thing that I wanted to clear up. Excuse me. Another thing that they talked about at the meeting that we felt that was wrong, misinformed, was us not attending the board meeting. We had actually a meeting prior to the board meeting that Friday where we discussed kind of what was going on and some of the issues that we had. At that time, it was made pretty clear that the decision was made, so out of respect for the board and kind of the process, we left it alone. We did reach out to see if there was a different way that we could address, and it was the same thing, was to meet with management. So we, again, decided to just kind of leave it alone, having seen that that's the way it was going to go, that's the way it was going to be voted, and we chose to just leave it alone. But again, having seen that we were misrepresented, we felt compelled to talk. So that's the second thing that we wanted to talk about. We think that there was a comment from the board that spoke about getting what you paid for, and we strongly disagree with that. Previous vendors have changed quality of paper towel, toilet paper midway through the contract in order to save money, intentionally sabotaging different, trying to sabotage different vendors with fraudulent paperwork, things like that. Nothing that we have done. So we felt that we represented ourselves and tried to give the best quality to the library that we could provide. From day one, we increased the quality of the products plus the services that the library had. we're actually the only vendor in Ann Arbor that ordered the specific toilet paper and paper towel that we had stocked the libraries with. Changed out dispensers immediately from day one of the contract, again, trying to just further that quality that we could offer to not only the members of the staff here, but also the community, obviously, of course. The other thing we wanted to point out, again, kind of back to some of the issues that we had 3 complaints in about a month and a half span. We addressed them. We actually got rid of the night crew that was at one of the branches. We replaced them, and then we provided additional training. So rather than replacing some of the day staff, we provided additional training. So we worked with them, Andrew worked with them side by side, 2 days in a row, 2 full days on shift, and then again, the same thing happened in the following week with the other day crew reporter. So rather than just terminating the daytime worker, we tried to give them more training instead of just kind of terminating, but we did make the necessary changes with the night crew terminating them. So we felt like we did what we were supposed to do, and just there wasn't enough time given. There wasn't enough time given to let the changes affect, and then of course, we chose not to attend last board meeting, just to kind of respect everybody's decision making. So that's what I felt.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
We appreciate especially your staying all the way to the end of the meeting.
Of course.
Yes. I think I saw one more comment.
Yes.
I have a cast, so my writing is even more inscrutable than it usually is. Hi, I'm Jessica Lita. I run the Building Matters Workshop Conversation Series through the Ann Arbor District Library, so thank you very much. And in general, if you ask around, I am the lady who super geeks out about buildings. I run the Ann Arbor YIMBY, that's the Yes in My Backyard page on Facebook. And so I'd like to ask if it would be appropriate and acceptable for me to share the EPIC MRA findings. I'm particularly interested in how acceptable people find the tax burden. That is really not the dominant narrative, and I'd love to put data out there because I'm also a data nerd, to be able to start to counter that. So would that be all right?
Yes, and
Okay.
I think most of the EPIC MRA findings are already available publicly, but
Excellent.
if it's hard for you to access them the way they are currently available, we'll get it to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
These are your resources.
Very good.
You paid for
Yeah.
them. And you should use them widely, and we would love for people to know more about the information
Very good. Then I'll
in
make
this
sure
study.
to link it back.
Yeah.
This is my first time attending an AADL board meeting, and I have to say this was really interesting. So
Thanks for
very
coming.
much.
Glad you came.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Please encourage other folks to
Yeah.
come. too. Yes, thank you.
And to watch online. Great. Okay, we might really be done now. Yes? Okay, great. All right. We are adjourned. We'll see you in a month.
Great, thank you.